So let's start with our first chapter of second PUC, that is typical configuration of computer system. We will go through this chapter in the form of important questions. Coming to the first one, explain the characteristics of motherboard. Now, when we come to characteristics, they are form factor, chipset, and processor socket. Okay, form factor, it refers to the motherboard's geometry, dimensions, arrangement, and electrical requirements. Chipset controls the majority of resources of the computer, and the main function of the chipset is to coordinate data transfer between the various components of the computer. When we come to processor socket, it is a rectangular connector into which the processor is mounted, and it also contains a processor fan and a coolant to reduce the heat produced by the processor. Now, coming to explain the types of motherboard. Okay, XT motherboard stands for extended technology, which is the oldest model motherboard having slot type processor socket with low insertion force. Okay, low insertion force processor socket. It has DIMM RAM slot, which means dual inline memory module RAM slot. It has ISA slots, that is industry standard architecture slots for add-on cards. It is a 12 pin power connector and no ports with it. Okay, it has 12 pin power connectors and no ports. Examples are Pentium 1 and Pentium 2 processor. Okay, then coming to AT motherboard stands for advanced technology having pin grid array sockets, SD-RAM slots, PCI slots, and ISA slots. So we'll see these slots in the coming questions, right? And the 20 pin power connector. Here it was 12 earlier, XT, 80, 20, right? Okay, examples are Pentium 3. Okay, Pentium 1 done, Pentium 2 done in extended technology. When the technology is advanced, we have Pentium 3 processors. Now coming to BB80 motherboard, which is a combination of that extended technology and advanced technology, having a slot type and pin grid array processor socket. Okay, slot type processor was in XT, pin grid array was in 80, right? So this is a combination, so it will have both. And it has SD RAM and DDR RAM slots, PCI and ISA slots. It is a 12 pin and a 20 pin power connector, right? And Pentium 3 is an example. Okay, as you can see, Pentium 3 is repeated in 80 as well as in baby 80, and Pentium 4 as well, baby 80. Now coming to ATX motherboard, it stands for Advanced Technology Extended, having MPGA. PGA, we saw it was pin grid array, right? As per this, what is that MPGA? M means micro pin grid array processor sockets. Again, we have a DDR RAM slots, PCI and AGP slots. Okay, primary and secondary IDE interfaces, we have SATA connectors, which are serial advanced technology attachment connectors, 20 pin and 24 pin ATX power connector. Examples are Pentium 4, which is again repeated from the baby 80, okay, and dual core, core to duo, quad core, right? As you can see, the word cores are repeated in ATX, right? I3, I5, and I7 processor as well. Now, this is a small question, that is, what is UPS? Explain types of UPS. So, UPS is an uninterrupted power supply that includes a battery to maintain power in the event of power failure. It keeps a computer running for several minutes to a few hours after power failure. Now, what are the two types of UPS that we have? It supply, first is the online one and second is the offline. When we talk about online one, it supplies the power from its own inverter even when the power line is functioning properly, right? And offline is when it monitors the power line and switches to battery power as soon as it detects a problem, right? So as you know, we can remember, we are always online when our phone is switched on, right? But if there is a problem in the power line of our phone, right, then what we do, we switch to some other outdoor games, right? So we are always online when we are on phone, right, when our phone is functioning properly, right? But if our phone is not functioning properly, or there is a power cut in our phone, or there is a battery cut actually, right, so then we switch to the outdoor games, or offline, we become offline that time, right? When we are online, our phone is functioning properly. When we are offline, there is a problem in our phone, and so we become offline, right? Now, what is cache memory? Explain their types. So this CACHE, this pronunciation, it has many different pronunciations. So whichever is comfortable, we can use. Now, a cache memory is a high-speed memory placed between RAM and CPU to speed up the processing. Now, there are three types: L1, L2, L3. So L1 is extremely fast but relatively small and is usually present inside the CPU. L2 may be located outside the CPU on a separate chip. A high speed system bus interconnecting the cache to CPU is present, right? Then we have L3, it is typically specialized memory that works to improve the L1 and L2. Now, the thing fact is that though it is slower than L1 and L2, it works to improve those two, right? That's the fact over here. It is usually double the speed of the RAM. What? L3. Now coming to SMPS, that is switch mode power supply. So an SMPS converts AC power from an electrical outlet to DC power needed by the system components. SMPS contains the power card plug, a fan for cooling because it also generates a lot of heat, right? Now coming before coming to this explain types of system bus, let's see what is a bus, okay, and the actual types of bus, okay. So when the word bus comes into picture, this is a super important diagram over there, right? So these are the system bus, types of system bus: control bus, address bus, and data bus, and in the way they connect the CPU, memory, and input and output. So now explain the features, functional features of a bus and its types. So what is a bus? Bus is a set of wires, and each wire can carry one bit of data. A bus width is defined by the number of wires in the bus. Types are internal bus and external bus. Internal bus connects the major components like processor, memory, and input output. It is also called a system bus. External bus connects different external devices like peripherals, expansion slots, input output ports, and drive connections to the rest of the computer. The external bus allows various devices to be attached to the computer, and hence it expands the computer's capabilities, right? So it is also called as expansion bus and is slower than the internal or system bus, right? Now we can come back to the question of system bus. What are the types of system bus, or what are the types of internal bus, right? So data bus is the first one, which provides a path to transfer data between the CPU and memory. Address bus connects the CPU and RAM with a set of lines similar to that of the data bus, right? And the address bus width determines the maximum number of memory locations that the computer can address. Now coming to control bus, when I say, it is used to control the access to and the use of data and the address lines, right? Then we have our next question, which is USB, right? Explain USB, give its features. So USB full form is Universal Serial Bus. These full forms are also quite important, right? This port is used to connect a variety of newer peripherals like printers, scanners, digital cameras, web cameras, speakers, etc. to the computer. And what are the features or advantages as asked in the question? Those are plug and play interface. It supports up to 127 devices. A new device can be added to your computer without adding an adapter card or even turning the computer off. And easy to use. So usually when they ask features, we can write plug and play, and a new device can be added without adding adapter or even turning it off, the computer off, or and it is easy to use. Okay, this can just be a point for MCQ. Then coming to explain different components of motherboard. So here is when people get confused between the components and characteristics, right? So when we say components, right, so components are the parts inside it, while characteristics are the thing that defines it. Means what? Characteristics just tells us about the outer features. Components tells us what is inside it, right? So for example, if I ask you what you had for lunch, if you tell me the lunch was very good, I loved it, it is the characteristic. But I asked you, what did you have? I asked you the components of your lunch. Then you will say you had dal, you had rice, right? Those are the components. Okay, now coming to the components of a motherboard. Processor is the first one. The processor or the CPU is the main component on the motherboard, right? It is a single integrated circuit which contains the entire computation engine, right? Engine is what? Engine is inside it, right? Component of the motherboard. The processor performance is measured by the number of instructions executed per second, known as clock speed. Next is basic input output system, BIOS. It is a small chip on the motherboard that holds the set of instructions to load the hardware settings during power on, self test, or post. It checks if the hardware devices are functioning properly. Then coming to CMOS, which is complementary metal oxide semiconductor. Again, full form's important. It is a type of memory chip to store date, time, and system parameters powered by lithium ion battery located on the motherboard itself. Right? Now coming to slots. A slot is a space on the computer where we can insert printed circuit board, that is PCB. Slots are also called as expansion slots, right? Now, coming to ISA, which is the first type, industry standard architecture, used to connect modem and other input devices. PCI, peripheral component interconnect, used to connect graphics cards, sound cards, etc., much faster than this ISA. AGP, accelerated graphics ports designed for video cards. Okay, RAM slots are used to install memory and to store the program and data that is currently being executed. Okay, so these all slots were discussed earlier in the types of motherboard, right? Now coming to disk controller, a device that connects the computer to exchange the data with other devices is called a disk controller. HDC, hard disk controller, and FDC are the two types. HDC, when I say, it is used to connect hard drives, CD drives, and DVDs. FDC, floppy disk controller, is used to perform data transfer from a floppy. Now coming to our last question, that is, what is a port? And two important ports we are going to study now. So that is, port is a socket on the computer used to connect external devices to the computer, right? And what are those two important? These are usually asked as definitions or differentiations, right? So that is, what is the difference between serial and parallel port? So serial port is also known as communication port or C port or RS-232 C ports. They are used for connecting communication devices like mouse and modem. This port transfer data serially, one bit at a time. Parallel ports are used to connect external input output devices like printers or scanners and are also known as printer ports, right? PPPP, same name, yeah. So they carry 8 bit at a time, 8 bits of data at a time, that is 1 byte. Okay, so you should not get confused between bit and byte. Bit is very small, right? And byte is greater. So you can assume bit is when it is, when we say a mouse bit, right? Mouse is so small, right? But our byte is so big, right? So that way you can remember. So 8 bits or 1 byte at a time. So with this we are done with this chapter.